Hi, I'm Natalie. I used to believe fixing things was my calling, until I realized all I ever did was clean up the damage my family kept causing. Can you cover this one last time? I'll pay you back, I promise. It started with a flat tire, then rent, then groceries, then just $180 for Laya's meds. I skipped dentist appointments, skipped meals, skipped life. Also, my sister could play the victim, and I could play the bank. But then came Thanksgiving. A cake box, bright orange frosting. Happy 6 months, Jay. She used the money I gave her for medicine to celebrate her boyfriend. And when I asked about it, she slammed the cake into my face. My family stayed seated. No one stood up for me. So I did. I sent her a bill, with interest. And this time, I didn't ask if it was okay. Before we begin, what time is it where you are? And tell me honestly, have you ever been punished for being the one who always says, yes? Drop a comment. Because sometimes the quietest person at the table is the one finally keeping the receipts. It was always small at first. A flat tire on Sierra's car. A lost deposit for daycare. I'll pay you back, Nat. I promise. She said it like a habit, and I let it become one. I still remember the day I got my acceptance letter to Cincinnati Tech Institute. That fat envelope, the thick paper that made it feel like someone believed in me. I had taped it inside my kitchen cabinet. The one above the sink with the hinge that stuck a little. The one I opened every night to grab a mug. It was the only thing in my apartment that made me feel like I had a future. The night I got the letter, Sierra called. Midnight. I didn't even hesitate. She was sobbing so hard I thought something terrible had happened. In a way, it had. Her husband had left, and the heater in her place had broken, and she didn't know what to do. Laya's shivering, Nat. I can't take her anywhere else tonight. So I wired her $400. That was supposed to be a one-time thing. One crisis, one emergency. But that's the thing about being the one who fixes. People start assuming you'll always fix. They stop asking whether you're okay. They just send the invoice. Within weeks, it was groceries, then daycare, then school supplies. You're just so good with money, she'd say, like it was a compliment. Like it didn't mean I was silently bleeding myself dry so her daughter could have an Elsa backpack and a matching thermos. I canceled a road trip I'd been planning for months. A cross-state drive with friends to Nashville. I told them I couldn't get the time off work. The truth? Sierra needed help with rent again. Just this once, she promised. And I said okay, because it was always easier to say yes than to feel the guilt afterward. It got to the point where I started skipping dentist appointments. I drove around all summer with a broken AC. My boss at the maintenance center joked I was always bundled up like a grandma in the winter and sweating like a dog in the summer. I laughed along. I didn't tell anyone that some nights I rationed groceries, that I'd stare at the shelf in Kroger and calculate how many meals I could make with canned beans and frozen rice. I didn't mind helping. Not at first. I loved Laya. Still do. But love shouldn't feel like a slow erasure of yourself. Somewhere along the way, my life had become a patchwork quilt of other people's emergencies. That night, I came home from a double shift and dropped my keys on the counter. The apartment was silent, the kind of silence that hummed in your ears when you'd gone too long without hearing laughter. I heated up a sad little dinner, instant noodles and a slice of half-stale bread, and sat on the couch, scrolling through my bank app without really looking. $62.78. That was it. 5 years of being the safety net. 5 years of just this once. And all I had was $62 and some change. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. The cabinet squeaked when I opened it, and there it was. Still there, taped neatly inside. Cincinnati Tech Institute. Congratulations on your acceptance. I ran my fingers over the edges. The tape had curled a little from the steam of daily use, but I hadn't peeled it down. I hadn't even dared to read the full letter in months. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. My phone buzzed. Sierra. Again. Hey, could you help with Leia's meds? $180. Sorry again. I stared at it. Not just the words, but the rhythm of it. The assumption. The casual apology. As if this were still a given. I started typing. Sure. Then I stopped. My thumb hovered over the blue send button. It pulsed gently on the screen, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't press send. Not yet. You can live inside a lie so long that when the truth knocks, it sounds like a stranger. Sierra called it an emergency, which I was starting to suspect was her code for I didn't plan ahead, but you always clean up the mess. She needed someone to watch Leia, just for a few hours. I said okay, because what else could I say? By the time I arrived, the sky was already bleeding into dusk. The November air cut through my sleeves as I walked up the stairwell to her unit. Apartment 8D. Same cracked tile in the hallway, same faint smell of someone's overcooked dinner. But inside? That was new. Warm lighting, candles flickering near the TV, the faint aroma of perfume. Not Sierra's usual fruity spray, but something deeper, muskier, expensive. I stepped inside and blinked. The living room had been rearranged. Throw pillows, a new rug, a sleek coffee table with glossy magazines I knew she didn't subscribe to. Leia came bouncing out of her room, pigtails flying. Auntie Nat. She wrapped her arms around my legs and I hugged her tight. For a moment, everything felt normal. But then my eyes drifted to the kitchen sink. 2 insulated coffee mugs sat upside down in the drying rack. Identical, matte black. Not the mismatched thrift store mugs I remembered. New dishes? I asked casually. Leia shrugged, already pulling me toward her coloring books. Mom says Jonas doesn't like plastic ones. Jonas? I smiled, feigning interest in a page full of half-colored dinosaurs. Who's Jonas? She giggled. The man who flips pancakes. I paused. He flips pancakes? Uh-huh. And he lets me ride in the fun car. It goes vroom real loud. And he got Mommy a robot that eats crumbs. Her face lit up, completely unaware she'd just detonated something inside me. I stayed quiet, nodding as she flipped to another page. But my mind started doing what it always did, connecting dots no one wanted connected. Sierra had said she was struggling, that every dollar I sent went to rent, food, medicine for Leia. She'd cried on the phone more than once, saying she felt like a failure, like she had no one but me. But now, robot vacuums? Pancake-flipping men? I got up to grab a glass of water and passed the hallway closet. The door was ajar. Something shiny caught my eye. A men's leather jacket. High-end. Not the kind you get secondhand. I glanced down. Polished black boots neatly placed beside Sierra's ballet flats. Above them, a toiletry bag bulging slightly open. I took another step. Inside the bag, nestled between a shaving cream tube and travel cologne, was a men's razor. There was a scent in the closet, too. That same musky cologne that lingered in the living room. I followed it like a breadcrumb trail. On the side table near the door sat a piece of unopened mail. Jonas Madsen. Apartment 8D. I stared at the envelope for a long second before slipping it back into the stack, perfectly aligned. My pulse beat louder in my ears than I wanted to admit. Later, after Sierra rushed out with a quick, "You're a lifesaver," I started taking photos. The mugs, the jacket, the mail, the closet. Even a Nordstrom bag peeking out from under the bed with a receipt taped to the side. 210 stilettos. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask Leia any leading questions, but as I tucked her in that night, she whispered sleepily, "Jonas says he's going to take us to hibachi again next weekend." I smiled and kissed her forehead. She brushed her teeth while humming to herself, water splashing against the sink. I waited until she was rinsing her mouth, then turned back toward the living room and whispered, quiet, almost reverent. "So I'm not funding survival. I'm funding date night." The cake was carrot, the frosting cream cheese, and the blood was mine. Thanksgiving at my parents' house always came with a thin film of tension, like plastic wrap over leftovers, trapping the rot just beneath. This year was no different. 14 people crammed around the dining table, making forced conversation while pretending cranberry sauce could mend what decades of silence never did. Sierra had texted me that morning. "You're coming to dinner, right? I have something special to share." I almost didn't, but guilt still tugged on the same old strings, and when I pulled up outside the old colonial with its perfect white shutters and dead flower beds, I already knew I'd regret walking through the door. The table was set with mismatched china from Grandma's estate and a centerpiece made of fake gourds. Dad carved the turkey with surgical precision, while Mom poured wine into the wrong glasses. People smiled, joked. I sat between Uncle Wes and a cousin whose name I couldn't recall, both of whom barely acknowledged my presence. Sierra arrived 40 minutes late, holding a white bakery box like it was the damn Ark of the Covenant. "I brought dessert," she beamed, placing it right in the center of the table. Uncle Wes, who never missed a thing, tilted his head. "Someone's feeling festive." Sierra grinned, already untucking the flaps. "It's a celebration cake." The moment she lifted the lid, my heart turned to glass. The writing in bright orange frosting said, "Happy 6 months, Jay." Jay, the air stilled. I glanced across the table, locking eyes with Sierra. "Jay as in Jonas?" I asked, calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. She didn't flinch. "Yes, Jonas. I didn't think you'd care since you're always too busy working night shifts and being single." A few forks paused midair. I straightened my posture. "You asked for help with Laya's meds last week." Sierra shrugged, voice sharper now. "So? Just because I have a boyfriend doesn't mean I'm suddenly rich." I exhaled through my nose. "You said you couldn't afford groceries." "I couldn't," she snapped. "God, Natalie, why do you always act like you're better than me?" "I never said I was better. Just maybe not the one being lied to." That was when it broke. "You're so bitter." She spat, her eyes glinting. "You've always hated when I got attention. You hate that I have someone, that someone actually loves me. Admit it. You're jealous I have something you'll never understand." The room was dead quiet. Even Laya, munching on a roll, had gone still. And then, before I could speak, before anyone could stop her, Sierra picked up the bakery box and slammed it into my face. The box crumpled inward. Cream cheese frosting exploded over my cheeks and into my eyes. The sweet sting of cinnamon, carrot, and shame filled my nostrils. Something cracked. Not just the room, but my lip, split against my own tooth from the force of cardboard and Sierra's ringed hand behind it. Silence. No one moved. Not Dad. Not Mom. Not Wes. Just a few napkins being slid awkwardly across the table. Eyes looked away. Forks resumed. I sat still, breathing through the sugar and the slow trickle of blood down my chin. Then I reached for my phone. Camera. Front-facing. Click. The screen showed a woman with cake in her hair, red dripping from the corner of her mouth. I didn't look pathetic. I looked done. In the family group chat, I typed, "This is what your daughter did when I said I wouldn't pay her rent anymore." I hit send. A minute passed. Then my phone pinged. Dad. "You know how emotional she gets." Mom. "Please don't escalate." I wiped frosting from my mouth with the back of my hand, stood up slowly and whispered, "Oh, I'm not escalating. I'm liberating." I tasted metal and sugar and realized neither family nor frosting was sweet enough to keep me quiet anymore. The coffee was cold. Not iced. Just old. The kind that tastes like regret and underpaid overtime. I sat in the kitchen, staring at my phone while the sun crawled over the chipped windowsill. Mom had messaged again. "Honey, she didn't mean it. It was a moment. Let's all move on." Dad followed minutes later. "We shouldn't let one dinner destroy the family. You've always been the strong one." Strong. That word again. I used to wear it like a badge. Now it felt like a muzzle. The dried blood on my lip had cracked open when I smiled bitterly at the screen. It hurt, but not as much as the silence at that dinner table. Not as much as realizing I was never going to get an apology, just a request for tolerance. A knock at the door pulled me out of my spiral. Uncle Wes stood there in a black pea coat and his usual half-grim expression. In his hand was a slim blue folder. "Coffee?" I offered, stepping aside. He shook his head. "Yours always tastes like guilt." I smirked. "You're not wrong." We sat at the tiny kitchen table. He slid the folder toward me. "She did this to me too. 2018. Said she needed help with tuition and a car down payment. I covered both. Never saw a dime back." I looked at him, startled. "You never said anything." He shrugged. "Thought it was just me, until I saw what she did to you last night. You're not crazy, and you're not alone." Inside the folder were printed text messages, Venmo receipts, and one email chain where Sierra had promised to repay everything by December. The year was never specified. I blinked. "You kept all this?" I learned the hard way. When people treat your kindness like a checking account, you need receipts. He leaned forward. "I also brought someone you should meet." An hour later, we sat across from a man in a gray wool vest and rimless glasses. His office smelled like paper and lemon oil. Everything was neat. Filed, labeled, under control. The exact opposite of Sierra's chaos. Marcus Lynn shook my hand once and didn't waste time. "I help people recover debts. Mostly family loans no one wants to talk about. But your case is unusually well documented." I handed him my folder. Texts from Sierra over 5 years, payment records, screenshots, even voice memos where she begged for extensions. He read quickly, a pen tapping rhythmically against the desk. "This isn't charity," he said finally. "This is a pattern of unilateral financial dependency, reinforced by emotional leverage. Classic case. We'll start with a demand letter. See if she blinks." He clicked open a form, entered the total I'd calculated down to the penny. $39,423.27. Due immediately, or it would affect her credit score. And escalate from there. The document printed with a mechanical whir. I stared at the crisp letterhead and my own name above the words, "Claimant." Something in my spine straightened. Marcus slid the envelope into a manila folder and nodded. "We'll email and mail a physical copy. Certified." As we left, Wes patted my shoulder. "Proud of you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just breathed. Deeply. For once. Back in my apartment, I reheated my coffee. The bitterness still lingered, but this time it was different. This time it tasted like resolve. My phone buzzed. Sierra was calling. I let it ring. Then a text flashed across the screen. "You sent a Fing collection agency on me?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "She cried." He agreed. They arrived together. Sierra's heels struck the tile of Marcus Lynn's waiting room like declarations of war. Jonas followed half a step behind, silent but grim. His once casual swagger was stiff, careful, like a man calculating his every movement. I watched from a corner seat, fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug of green tea I had no intention of drinking. I had no idea what she told him on the drive over, but judging by the fire in her eyes, it involved betrayal, cruelty, and maybe a few dramatic lies. Marcus opened the glass door and welcomed them in, voice calm as ever. Sierra barely waited for introductions. "You dragged my family through legal hell over what? A couple of favors? You're seriously this petty, Natalie?" I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch, awkward and potent. Marcus gestured to the seats, ignoring the jab. "We're here to discuss the formal repayment plan," he said, tone as sterile as his office decor. "All documentation has been reviewed and the claim is within full legal right." Sierra rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. This is family. You don't sue family." I blinked once. "You're right. You don't sue family. unless they think family is a free ATM. Marcus opened the file and began explaining the breakdown. Sierra interrupted 3 times before Jonas finally lifted a hand to stop her. She sat back, crossing her arms, jaw clenched. After a pause, Jonas leaned toward Marcus. "Could I talk to you privately for a moment?" Marcus raised an eyebrow but nodded. The 2 men stepped into the adjoining office, the door shutting with a gentle but definitive click. I didn't move. Sierra did. She turned toward me, eyes narrowed. "This is disgusting. You've embarrassed us. Laya will hear about this one day." "And what? You'll tell her aunt destroyed her mom over money?" I tilted my head. "I think Laya will ask where her school photos are, or why Mommy cried about medicine but bought stilettos and lobster rolls." She blinked. Her cheeks flushed. "And besides," I added, "I didn't destroy anyone. I just stopped playing along." The door opened again. Jonas returned, looking paler. His jaw flexed as he slid a check across the desk. Marcus picked it up, inspected it, and nodded once. $5,000 up front, Marcus confirmed, plus signed agreement, $500 per month until the balance is satisfied. I felt the weight of the room shift. For the first time in years, Sierra looked cornered. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You chose her?" Jonas didn't flinch. "No," he said, eyes on the paperwork. "I chose a future." The rest was procedural. Initials, copies, digital forms emailed to all parties. Sierra signed with the grace of a woman trying not to break a pen in half. We didn't speak again as they left. But just before the door swung shut, I saw Jonas glance back. Once, like a man realizing he hadn't gotten away clean. Later that night, as I sat in my dim kitchen, my phone buzzed with a payment notification. $350 from Jonas Madsen. Memo. Debt payment number 1. I stared at it for a full minute, fingers unmoving. Then I opened my laptop and typed slowly into the search bar. Evening Electrical Engineering Classes, Cincinnati 2025. The taste was smoky, bitter, perfect. And mine. I sat cross-legged on my floor, mug between my palms, steam curling like a soft exhale from a life I'd kept holding in. The bag had cost $13. Ethiopian single origin, roasted in some tiny place downtown with string lights and pretentious baristas. It had taken me 37 minutes to choose it. I walked past it twice. Reached for the cheaper blend with the yellow discount tag. Almost grabbed it. Then didn't. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to measure my worth against what I could spare. No Sierra, no urgent text, no split-second calculation of what was more important, my joy or someone else's panic. The fridge hummed in the background. I'd cleaned it that morning, purged the old almond milk and sticky jelly jars with half-peeled labels. I left one thing taped to the door, a blank white sheet. For now. The email had arrived at 6:43 a.m., subject line, "Welcome to Electrical Tech Institute. Spring cohort confirmed." I'd read it 3 times before my body let me believe it. January 12th. Classes begin. Campus badge photo next week. It wasn't the same as the original offer. Cincinnati Tech Institute had long passed, but this time I wasn't 18, hopeful and alone. I was bruised, older, unsoftened. And I chose it. Wes had texted at dawn. "You did what none of us had the guts to. Don't look back." I replied simply, "I won't." A small red toolkit sat beside my coffee cup. I'd had it for years, tucked under sinks and in drawers, used to fix appliances I could barely afford to keep. Tighten this, patch that, duct tape and late nights. My entire 20s were spent being the one who made broken things run a little longer. But this kit was different now. Cleaned, reorganized. Not emergency gear, but tools of intention, creation, design. I flipped open the top latch and traced my finger along the rows, tiny screwdrivers, voltage meter, coiled wire. The scent of metal and possibility. No more rationing kindness. No more duct taping my future so someone else could coast. I stood, walked over to the fridge, and grabbed a Sharpie from the drawer. Orientation, January 12th, 2025. Underneath, I wrote in slanted block letters, "Start building for me." I leaned back against the counter, the weight in my chest slowly giving way to something lighter. Not joy, not yet, but clarity. The kind that comes after you stop negotiating with ghosts. Sierra hadn't messaged since the payment transfer. My parents hadn't called. The silence was not peace, but it was clean, intentional, uncluttered. And that somehow was the loudest resolution of all. This time, I'm not fixing anything. I'm building from scratch. I didn't cry when the email came. I didn't jump or shout or pour champagne into a cracked mug. I just sat there, legs folded beneath me, the scent of smoky beans curling in the kitchen like steam off a long-cooled wound. It was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But it wasn't empty. I stared at the screen, that one line glowing like some distant shore I had once tried to swim toward, then let myself drown before reaching. Welcome to Electrical Tech Institute. Spring cohort confirmed. No Sierra, no apologies, no last-minute emergencies. Just me, my name, and an inbox that had finally brought something back instead of always asking for more. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead to the cabinet door, the one where I used to keep the taped-up letter. 5 years ago, I had left that acceptance envelope up like a monument to every what-if I couldn't afford. Like I owed the world my dreams in exchange for someone else's comfort. I don't think I ever mourned that first version of me properly. She had stars in her eyes, grease on her hands, and the kind of hope you only carry when you don't know how heavy disappointment can get. She wasn't weak, just uninformed. Now, I know better. The silence that followed Thanksgiving didn't hurt. It healed. The absence of Sierra's texts, the fact that my parents didn't even ask if I was okay after the cake incident, none of it surprised me anymore. I finally stopped interpreting their quiet as peace. It was just distance. Cold, mathematical, and overdue. What shocked me most was how quickly the ache faded. I thought I'd miss them, but it turns out you can't miss a role you were forced to play. You just breathe deeper when the costume comes off. Uncle Wes still checks in, sometimes with a meme, sometimes with a sentence or two that says more than whole conversations ever did. Saw the payment hit? Bet Sierra's pissed. Proud of you, Nat. You did the hard thing. Yeah, I did. Jonas never reached out again, not even to apologize. And maybe that was the best ending I could ask for. One where he disappeared into the same smoke he once drove in with. Leather jackets, fancy cologne, a big house with no spine. Sierra chose him because he looked like stability. He left because he needed it elsewhere. And me? I bought another bag of that overpriced coffee last week. I didn't even flinch. It tasted bitter, still. But it was mine. Sometimes I leave the apartment door open for the morning breeze. I sit by the window and sketch circuit diagrams on scrap paper, practicing for the night classes that will start in January. My hands still know how to fix things, but now they fix for me. And every time I look at the note on my fridge, orientation, January 12th, 2025, I don't see what I've lost anymore. I see what I refuse to lose again. This isn't revenge. It's repair. And it's permanent. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper slowly through unpaid debts and silenced dreams, until one day the silence is broken. Natalie didn't win by shouting louder. She won by choosing not to be silent at all. Justice, when backed by patience and proof, doesn't need drama. Like the final spark that lights a darkened room, it arrives not to start a war, but to end one. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. And sometimes liberation doesn't come with fireworks, just a $13 bag of coffee, a clean toolkit, and the courage to never be small again. If you've ever been the fixer, the forgiver, the one who bled quietly so others could be comfortable, this story is yours too. Hit like if you've ever paid the price for someone else's peace. Hit subscribe if you're finally learning that peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else whole. It comes from finally choosing yourself. And in the comments, tell me, when did you stop saying just this once? I read every story, because sometimes the loudest kind of freedom is no longer apologizing for what you're no longer willing to carry.